If you want to create an excellent film or TV show, you have to have two things working on all cylinders: the story and the storytelling. But if only one of them is working, you're going to get a bunch of mixed reactions from your audience, and that is what the recent film Dune is experiencing. So we're going to pull apart both the story and the storytelling of Dune so you can better understand these core traits of any story for the screen, and we're going to start with storytelling. I do have an important announcement at the end, so be sure to stick around for that. Storytelling's main focus is the audience's experience while consuming the story. That's storytelling. And storytelling includes all of the elements that are going to get at the audience's emotions. And because film is a visual and auditory medium, the visual and audio elements play a big role in the storytelling process. There are other pieces, of course, but if you've seen Dune, you probably had the same reaction that I and my 15-year-old daughter had when we watched it. Awe. Dune is eye candy upon eye candy upon eye candy. It is truly a beautiful film. It is visually stunning and incredible. And if it isn't even nominated for awards in things like set design, costumes, special effects, that's gonna be a travesty because the visual components of Dune are mesmerizing. And I regularly heard, as I was sitting in the theater, wows and oh my's as I watched the story, and some of them came from me and my daughter. And you might think, well, as a screenwriter though, I can't control the shot composition or color palette or shot duration or shot choice or anything like that. And to an extent, that's kind of true. I mean, lots of decisions do get made by directors and cinematographers, set designers that are way outside of the control of the screenwriter. And in part, that's required because unlike a novel, we don't put everything in a screenplay. It is a collaborative process. However, the screenplay should be evoking specific emotions in the reader. And these emotions of epicness and vastness, of oppression and of power and powerlessness, I mean, those should all be coming across in the script because that is storytelling. A benefit for Dune, though, is that it's based on a famous and well-loved novel by Frank Herbert, which was first published in 1965. And this recent film by Denis Villeneuve is an attempt to be as close to the text as he can be. In fact, Denis mentions in multiple interviews that he would regularly refer back to the novel at all stages of the filmmaking process, from pre-production all the way through post. But because film is a visual medium, the visuals, when they're engaging to an audience, they keep our interest and they shape our emotions. This is part of the storytelling process, the visuals are. And this is why you constantly hear the mantra of show, don't tell in screenwriting. Because when things are visually interesting and engaging, it holds the audience's interest. That's part of storytelling. But another huge part of storytelling is sound. And like the visuals, you might think that screenwriting doesn't really include sounds. I mean, sometimes you do, but for the most part, we think that I don't really include sounds. But again, that's not true. As a screenwriter, yeah, you aren't putting in sound effects and music hits and cues. Of course you're not. But you are including elements like tone and emotion. And while you don't ever want to say, okay, the music swells because of this big emotional moment, you don't ever want to say that in a screenplay. But if you've done your job correctly, any reader will surmise that this moment is a big emotional moment, and the composer and sound designer will determine, along with the director, how music and sound effects can pull on that emotional thread that you've included in the screenplay. Again, you aren't telling the audience how to feel. You are letting them experience the film, and what they see paired with what they hear creates an emotional response. And if you can begin to shape and hone the emotional response of the audience, well, now you're engaged in storytelling. And the sound in Dune is amazingly epic, if at times a bit too loud and oppressive. Although you could argue that the oppressiveness of the sound is meant to enhance the feelings of oppressiveness that the audience is supposed to be feeling. I mean, the sound design and score is sweeping and broad when it needs to be, and it's subtle and at times even unsettling when it needs to be. But just having solid visuals and just having solid audio isn't all there is to storytelling. I mean, they're big parts for sure, but they aren't all the tools that the storyteller has at their disposal. And you, as you tell stories for the screen, you have to begin to see and hear your film in your head and in your mind's eye as you write. Most writers, when seeing scenes in their head, we just see them as a large master shot. We see everything going on at once, and we can kind of move in and out, and we just kind of write in one master shot, kind of everything happening at once. But on screen, it doesn't work like that. There are wide shots, close-ups, extreme close-ups, and a host of other shots and camera movements that can be employed. And no, you don't include camera directions in your script, but the way you write impacts the emotional experience of the reader. Again, storytelling. And when you talk about the epic scene, a reader can't help but see it epically. And when you describe a small object with some detail, a reader can't help but see that as a close-up. And this is an important part when talking about storytelling. It's this. It's not what you write that is important to the storytelling. It's how you write it. The words you choose, the sentence structures you stitch together. It sounds lyrical or intimidating or threatening, and the reader begins to feel those emotions. And when the readers are the filmmakers, like the directors, the cinematographers, set designers, composers, they translate those feelings into sets and shots and costumes and casting choices and music choices. And in this effort, Dune succeeds. I mean, the emotions come through in the shots, in the costumes, in the colors or lack thereof, in the sound design, in the dialogue cadences, in the casting, and in the score. And what happens is when all of these things are working together, we, the audience, can literally feel the world of the movie. I mean, if you've watched Dune, you probably feel like you went to Arrakis and had some sand in your clothes afterwards. I mean, maybe even breathed a little bit of spice along the way. And this is what good storytelling does. It transports your audience to a new place in a new time, someplace they've never been. We want to go see a spectacle. We want to go see and experience something we haven't seen or experienced. So give us a good storytelling experience. And think about this for a minute. When you go to watch a movie, you're going to participate in that world. And if the storytelling is excellent, you feel like you are a part of that world. You feel like that world, even though you know in your head, okay, I know this world isn't real, but you feel like it's real and you feel like you've been there. And this is what storytelling is about at its core, emotionally moving an audience. Think about the movies that you like for a minute, the worlds of those movies. They are very real to you, as real as hitting a like button if you're finding value, subscribing if you haven't, commenting below about your favorite movie world that you know. I mean, you really know that that world is real because, I mean, there've got to be Jedis somewhere, right? And you as a screenwriter have a host of storytelling tools at your disposal. And there's no way we can go through all of them in one video. But I will mention one key thing that nearly all of them have in common. We, as people, we don't like unresolved mysteries. When things around us are unresolved, we work to resolve them. If there's a puzzle that gets left undone in a story that we're reading or watching, when we leave that story, we're trying to figure it out. And if you want to force your audience to participate in a story, any type of mystery you create is going to keep them engaged. Now, there are limits, okay? So you can go a little too far, but generally mysteries are a good thing. And Dune is full of mysteries. Now, if you aren't familiar with the basic story of Dune, there is a lot of information that you need to know to be able to track. So you got to know stuff about the different houses, the power dynamics, the religious order, and all these visions that Paul is having, and he can't make sense of them, so neither can we make sense of them. And so we watch in order that we can begin to make sense of all of these mysteries. And in the course of Dune, some are resolved, some are not. But because of these mysteries, which are created in many ways by the visuals and enhanced by the audio, we are held captive, tuned in, and watching. They keep our attention because we don't like unresolved things. We don't like to not fully understand something. And because of the stunning visuals and the epic sound, we begin to trust the storytellers that they're going to eventually resolve all of these mysteries for us. But at some point, the storytelling just isn't enough. I mean, it might keep an audience watching till the end, okay? But there is one other key element that a film has to have working for it, and that is the story. And if you're not new to this channel, You are familiar with what a story is, so say it with me. A story is about someone who wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it, and they get it or they don't. And here's why having a story is critical. It helps the audience know what they're rooting for. As they're watching the story, as they're participating in the story, we have to know what we're rooting for. And sometimes we root for the protagonist to get what they're after. Sometimes we're rooting against them because we don't like them, or we feel like they don't deserve what they're after, or they don't need it, or we know it's not going to be good for them. And what this does is it causes us, the audience, to be emotionally invested in the outcome of the story. So we have to be emotionally invested along the way. That's the storytelling. But we also have to be emotionally invested in the outcome. What all of this stuff means. What's going to happen? What's a result of that? I've got to be emotionally invested in the outcome. And without a story, I can't get there. For those of you who have seen Dune, just think about this question for a second. How did you feel at the end of the movie? Based on the reactions of those around me in the theater and what I've also read online of other people's reactions, most people at the end of the movie were kind of like, huh, okay, whatever. And the reason is there was no emotional investment by the audience. And if you've done any YouTube search about Dune, this new one, several videos have the title of things like, The Ending of Dune Explained. Okay, here's a note. If you have to explain the ending, the story isn't working. Period. Okay, yes, people are familiar with the book, are excited for part 2, which has been announced as I'm recording this. And yes, most everyone is blown away by the visual and audio elements of Dune Part 1. Yes, we kept watching to get some of those questions answered, but through all of that, through all of the stuff that we saw and heard and experienced, we didn't really care what happened if we understood the ending at all. I mean, I didn't really care if Jessica lived or died, or if Duke Leto died, or if even Paul died. And this is the point where everyone who is a fan of the novel is about to hate on me and express some vitriol, but I want to be clear. We are talking about the story elements of the film. And as this channel is focused on screenwriting, where story and storytelling must be working together, and because I'm candid, I shoot straight, I have to say the story of Dune Part 1 falls incredibly short. Even though I enjoyed watching the film because the storytelling was excellent. It pulled me in. I was engaged. But the story could have been so much better if it had been working properly. And this is a downside of films that are trying to stay true to the novels that they're based on. A novel and a film are completely different mediums. Yes, story and story elements are the same no matter what medium you're working in. But when you take half of a novel, in other words, half of a story, and try to make a film about it, which is supposed to be a whole story, and if you don't modify the story elements at least a little, the story is going to be lacking. And that's what happened in Dune. And you can 100% know it's a story problem and not a storytelling problem when readers or viewers react positively to the storytelling elements, like visual and audio pieces, but then ultimately say that they didn't care about the story or the characters. I mean, these are several quotes of critics published on Rotten Tomatoes, and the general consensus is the movie is visually stunning and amazing, but the story felt empty, non-emotional, and my favorite, an epic for the eye, not the heart. I mean, those reactions are a result of there not being, and yes, I'm about to say it, there not being a coherent story in Dune Part 1. And let me pull this apart, going back to our definition. Someone who wants something badly is having trouble getting it, they get it or they don't. Okay, this is our definition working from. And I think we would all agree that Dune is Paul Atreides' story. Okay, Paul is played by Timothée Chalamet, is clearly the main character. We track with him for most of the movie. We are generally limited to his point of view. It is 100% his film. So someone, okay, so good so far. Someone who wants something badly. Okay, this is where the train starts to run off the tracks. And it's because of this wants something badly, that's the piece that holds the whole second act of your story together. That's the middle. But there's nothing clearly holding the middle together. It's a bunch of random events, seemingly random events. Now, you could make an argument, or try to, that what Paul wants is he wants to reject the Messiah role that's being projected onto him. So he wants to reject it. He doesn't want to be that person. So what he wants is he wants to avoid being the Messiah the Fremen are looking for. So you could say, you might want to track with that and make that your argument. But the problem with this is that Paul isn't actively trying to avoid it. I mean, he uses the visions that he's having. He even kind of likes them. He keeps them a secret. And if he didn't want to be this Messiah figure, he would be trying to find a way to, at minimum, suppress them. Now, you could also make the argument that the middle of Dune Part 1 is about whether House Atreides will get spice production up and running, or whether House Atreides will survive the coming attack by House Harkonnen. But the problem with all of these is that if one of them is what is being pursued in the second act, then the main character isn't Paul anymore. It's probably his father. And spoiler alert, you typically don't have the main character die at the end of the second act. So let me give you one example of how to remedy this that would not have drastically changed the film, but it would have given us something to root for. What if Paul's dad had been very clear to Paul that the reason House Atreides was given Arrakis was to eliminate them from contention for the throne? And Paul's job, this is what he's being tasked with. Paul's job is to plan a way for he and his mother to survive if an attack comes, and then create an alliance with the Fremen. So Paul then now starts to inspect the palace, inspect the city, finding escape routes, planning a way to get out. He's watchful of an attack, not taking sleeping pills and being unconscious when it comes. And when it comes, he puts his plan into motion. Only he didn't account for some things, and his plan goes all wrong, except for a kind payment by the doctor to help Paul and Jessica, just like in the book. Most of those keep everything in the book intact, but we're adding just a little bit to give us some semblance of something to root for, because now we're rooting for Paul to find a way to escape if he needs to, while we're secretly hoping that he's not going to have to escape with his life, okay? That he's not going to have to find a way to get out. But once he escapes, then we know that the third act is whether or not he's going to be able to connect with a Fremen. So in this case, our story would be Act 1, House Atreides is granted rule of Arrakis, but this is all a big political hot mess, okay? Act 2 is whether Paul can figure out how to escape and survive with Jessica, all while learning of his growing abilities and while his father is trying to get spice production up and running, while also fortifying defenses. But the defenses don't hold. Paul's escape plan doesn't work, but using his wits and his friendships, his relationships, he's able to escape with Jessica. And now in Act 3, he just has to survive the desert and find the Fremen, which he does, and they accept him in as one of their own. Now we have something to root for along the way, and this is why you need a solid story. Because without it, the audience doesn't care what happens to the characters because we've got nothing to root for. So as it is in Dune Part 1, we're not even sure at the end if Paul being accepted by the Fremen is a good thing or not. We don't know. I mean, he doesn't seem all that thrilled about it. Jessica doesn't seem all that thrilled about it. Actually, neither do any of the Fremen. I mean, it might be good, I guess, because the Fremen have Javier Bardem and Zendaya, but we really don't know. And that's why people feel the need to explain the ending. But they wouldn't have had to explain the ending if the story had been working on all cylinders. So when you don't have a story, okay, you're kind of in trouble. And my guess is there's going to be a drop-off in people who want to watch Dune Part 2 because at the end of Dune Part 1, they don't care about the characters or their fate or anything that happens in the world of Dune. It's visually amazing, but I don't care because the story wasn't working, so I'm not going to go see it. And as a screenwriter who tells stories for the screen, you have to be concerned about both the story, so the audience knows what to be rooting for, and the storytelling, so the audience has a great experience of participating in the film or TV show. So yes, people generally like Dune because the storytelling elements are so engaging. But there is a lot of feelings of, because there wasn't much of a story and we didn't care for those characters or what happens to them. Again, I think this is ultimately a result of trying to stay too true to the events in the novel. But by only taking half of the novel's story, the film's story is incredibly lacking, and the characters never become much deeper than their screenplay's summation, which is a bummer. You know, I have a feeling, because of what happens in the second part of the novel, that Dune Part 2 will be much more enjoyable on a story level, and the visuals will continue to be amazing and astounding. And so I'm guessing the storytelling is going to be excellent. I am looking forward to Dune Part 2. But when you are writing your own screenplays, whether you're adapting the work of someone else or creating something entirely new, I don't want you to miss one of these key elements that causes you to ineffectively tell the stories that you're wanting to tell. I want you to have both a solid story and I want you to tell it well. And if you want to join a group of like-minded screenwriters and you'd like my help along the way, my coaching program, the Screenplay Navigator, might be for you. I help you walk through the process of writing a screenplay from idea all the way through revision so you can learn to masterfully tell stories that matter. And we walk through that process 3 times a year, but you can work at your own pace, working faster or slower as you're able or as you want to. And applying is simple. Click the link below and sign up for a free call. And on that call, I'll answer any questions you have. We'll talk about the program. We can both decide if you'd be a good fit. And once you're in the Screenplay Navigator program, you'll not only be part of our twice-a-month group calls and our community, but you'll also get access to the Screenwriting Fast Track course, which is a robust course meant to fill your writing toolbox full of story and storytelling tools. And you'll also get a few other things that will help transform you into a screenwriter who can expertly tell stories that matter. So if you want to be a screenwriter that can tell stories that matter in an expert way, be sure to click on the Screenplay Navigator link below, learn more, book a free call with me. I look forward to chatting with you. And the one other announcement that I promised you earlier in the video. I recently experimented with something I called the One Scene Challenge, where viewers submitted a scene and I chose one and reworked that scene as a video, which I'll link right here. But the overwhelming feedback I got was, please do this again. So I am. This time, we're gonna focus on first scenes of your script. They must be a page or less, submitted as a PDF, and you can submit them to ask@bigredstripe.com. Anything longer than a page won't be accepted. So if it's longer than a page, no good. And it should be the first scene of a screenplay or a TV pilot that you're working on. Anyone could submit. I'll choose one, talk about what's working, what isn't, and I'll revise it as a future video. The deadline for submission for the One Scene Challenge is midnight this Friday, November 5th, 2021, midnight Pacific time. I'm in LA, so midnight Pacific time. Can't even get that out. Midnight Pacific time this Friday, November 5th. If you're interested in that, be sure to keep your submission to one scene, one page, as a PDF. Get it to me by midnight Friday. I'm looking forward to seeing what you all submit. Ultimately, I want to help you become a better writer and storyteller. And if you found any value in this video at all along the way, and you haven't already, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell, all of that. I really do appreciate it. And when you go to tell a story, you need a solid story and you need to tell it well, and you should tell a story that matters. See you later.